I'm going to be your chair. My name is Kage Samuel. I'll quickly let my panelists introduce themselves.
My name is Martin.
And my name is Joy.
So we'll be timing through the debate. Keep you here. 7 minutes, 15 seconds. From 7:15, no judge will be writing anything. Apart from that, we wish you guys the best of luck. And Prime Minister, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Just before I start, I'll take my POIs in the normal way. You can raise. I'll take a POI from closing or opening. Okay. And okay. So panel, notice that firstly, within the metrics of this particular resolution, right? We are looking at a world or a scenario where you do not have foresight. That is, you do not know what is actually going to happen in the future concerning this particular child, whether they will actually be able to profit the world or not, whether benefits will accrue or not, and all these other things. But we need to contrast firstly whether it would be better for this house as this particular child to either be a late bloomer or a prodigy. A late bloomer is one whereby you develop, right? But then you develop after having gone through firstly the experiences of life, then maybe you enter your talents or your genius and all these things, probably maybe at years that are later also, in terms of maybe 20 or 15 years or so. When you look at a prodigy, you are innately a genius from the beginning, right? And what that looks like is that you immediately move into a particular career path. If you're a genius in mathematics, you begin to do those particular things. If you're a genius in talents, in music, someone who looks like Wolfgang Mozart, who begins to compose music at his earliest ages, right? So what I'm going to be doing for you is firstly a comparative to show you that, one, why is it better for a child to be a late bloomer rather than a prodigy? First argument panel is that when you look at a child, the things that are prioritized are, one, the life experiences that they go through. Second is that in the importance of their human development, every single environment around this child should look at what is in the best interest of that particular child. And this is where the importance of the childhood experiences come in. Childhood growth has experiences like, one, basic human interaction and connectivity in terms of like the people that they are around. Two, basic experiences in terms of learning that emphasize discipline and also the ability for them to be able to deal with the different social pressures of life and all these particular things. But in a world where you have a child prodigy who goes out immediately, they most likely will miss out on these particular experiences, as I'm going to show you. Firstly, when you speak about a child prodigy, this is a person who looks like, one, they are too smart for the children of their age, right? Because like their IQ is very high. But also secondly is that they are not able to interact with the children of their age, but they are not also able to interact with the people who are like at the same level of their IQ. Why? Because the people who are at the same level are already adults and they are interacting with the people in their own circles. So you'll have these people alienated, ostracized, and also lonely to the extent that they end up being sad, they end up being depressed, they end up having their IQ right, but they do not have like the emotional intelligence to deal with basic human interaction or even the people around them. That is first. Second panel, you realize that the pressures of fame that follow like a child prodigy are diverse in terms of like the people who are always around them and them like always being able to associate these people with these people. Most times, child prodigies do not have the benefit of discipline or even experience for them to be able to handle that particular fame. So in the long run, you have them like maybe they have a lot of money coming in and stuff like that, but then they squander it and they are not able to like live that particular disciplined life, and that is why it again costs them in the long run. But also thirdly, panel, is the benefit of human experience. Human experience helps to tame someone, one, to get discipline, but also to get the ability for them to like be able to self-determine their different lives and also be able to self-actualize, right? But then in the instance of a child prodigy, you realize that where one is devoid of human discipline and experience, it really cannot benefit them, because on a balance, one is that the child prodigy and their intelligence, whatsoever it may be, most likely benefits the people around them, right? In terms of like, if I am good at maybe mathematics, or I'm good at chemistry, I am good in talent and music, I will most likely benefit the people around me who feed on my information. So it is more like exploitative, but it doesn't benefit me, because the cost that I am experiencing is, one, in terms of lessened human interaction. True is the inability for me to develop as a child, inability for me to have the human experiences and like the joy that accrues with actually being a child. What we are arguing for from OG is, why is it important for children to actually be able to have these experiences that later in time form their basic human development and the ability for them to manage. Now, on a late bloomer, you will have achievement first of a late bloomer. We've had people in status quo, right, and in the world who have actually been late bloomers. Take the example of Colonel Sanders, who found KFC, and right now KFC is still existent, right? This kind of career or this kind of business has been founded, one, on discipline, two, the knowledge for you to know how to better manage a business or the career or your particular talent, right? So there is a better longevity and even a better likelihood of success in that kind of a late bloomer. But also, second is, you will have better satisfaction, right? Because one is, this person enters into the place of their talent when they have already learned like how to manage it and also how to better experience it, which cannot happen with a child prodigy, because with a child prodigy, they do not have the basic learning, right, and the experiences of how to better manage the spotlight or the limelight when they get into it. So they are most likely to fail and also squander. But with a late bloomer is, they've already had basic human interaction, and this interaction has, one, taught them how people operate, right, how they learn to interact with other people on the different divide, and also it has taught them, secondly, how they can like better self-actualize in terms of dealing with these people. So when they begin out to pursue their different talents and their different courses, they can better experience or even like better profit these people. But also, lastly, panel, is the argument which falls to the best interests, like on which particular side do you have the best interests of the child like better actualized? Yeah. On the side of a prodigy, you have more of like an exploitative kind of scenario of a child who is being used, but like their best interests and their basic rights as a child are not really actualized in terms of their ability to live freely, their ability to interact with their peers, and also their ability to like gain all these experiences that later found the basic like magnitude of human interaction. But on our side, you have a child who has like fully matured and fully grown. That is, they have first of all gone through that particular process that is important for their growth, and then secondly, they move into the different achievements of their blooming. And that is why it is important, because you get better happiness, better self-actualization. On the other side, there is only loneliness, sadness, depression, and mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. Now I'd like to welcome the leader of opposition to continue the debate. Hear, hear.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, imagine all of us have 100 years of life to live, and there is the likelihood that you need to be able to succeed or to make a decision in order to be able to succeed in your early ages as compared to you being able to succeed in your later ages. For instance, when we come to the world of football, Messi, Mbappe, and all those who live in their category, being able to identify their talent as early as possible and being able to push forward to be able to be successful at the end, and how they are able to self-actualize within that instance, as compared to someone like Modric, who is able to identify all his talents and be able to use it at the later life of his life, where he's not able to even maintain that kind of like any form of reward he gets in return. We think this analysis alone already plays 00 first, because at the end of the day, we are able to tell you how this in itself is gives the like how a child boomer necessarily already give you advantage. I'll give you more clarity on that. But then one clarity he failed to tell us in his PM speech is that at the heart of this particular people, there is a general lack of complete awareness of self. Which means that from both instances, you don't necessarily have a complete self-awareness of what you are going to do. So it means that that is the first thing. It means that at the end of the day, individuals, whether to make the decision, should be able to prioritize getting that kind of success and identifying their talent as quick as possible, or deferring it to a later stage of life where all of them are not even like aware of what is going to happen. Second thing you need to know is that there is the general lack of understanding of how your career is going to go. Because it means that all the social interaction he talks in his world is going to exist in the other way around. Because at the end of it, whether you are a child bloomer or a late bloomer, you still need that social interaction. They are unable to tell us how those external influences that exist within status quo is immediately going to change because you are going to be a late bloomer. We think it better exists from our side when we are able to tell you at the end of the day that you have like certain potentials as a child bloomer to be able to achieve. So the impact here is that most of them don't necessarily note the outcome. It means that there is a critical decision for them to be able to make, i.e. making the decision and identifying their talents early, or deferring that benefit they think in the future that the outcome they don't know. We think it's very important. So that leads me to my first extension. Why is it important to recognize your talent at that early stage of life? One, we think that there is 5 structural reasons why individuals should be able to, at the early stage of life, to identify their talent. First, we think those years are your developmental and formative years, which means that there is a lesser pressure on you to be able to achieve, because everyone is able to adapt to a child and everyone is willing to help a child be able to succeed in their life. In the comparative, what happens is that when you are old, necessarily there is a huge societal pressure on you to be able to achieve. People immediately feel that you wasted all your life in order to be able to do unnecessary things. So there is less incentive of society to be able to correlate with you and help you achieve your dreams and other things. And within yourself, you feel that you are done and you are more likely doesn't have any potentiality to be able to grow. We think that in itself is something that is bad and unjustified and win. Second level is that very huge cognitive capacity and comparative advantage to be able to learn and unlearn. What this means is that you have an advantage and a bigger and a lesser pressure on you, as I mentioned earlier, but you have the opportunity to be able to learn within society. Your cognitive capacity is high, you are able to learn, you are able to get this experience that he's talking about. Again, we think that in itself is something that is important. Why is this cognitive or learning, why is this learning and unlearning very important? We think what makes an individual successful at the end is when you are able to be able to have the cognitive capacity. We all sit here and we feel that at our later stages, we have the opportunity to learn so many things and you are able to grasp so many things, which means that you're identifying that in itself at the later stages give you the opportunity to widen your scope. Necessarily, that kind of social neglect he talks about is something that is not going to exist and is not mutually exclusive from our side, because people who are dumb are socially neglected in themselves. People who are smart sometimes even have the opportunity for people to see them as people who are unique and celebrate them in the status quo and like be able to utilize the kind of IQ they want. We think we prefer our world, and that is better. Third thing you need to understand is that there is huge bias for very young people, which means that people want to help young people, people want to work with young people, people want to be able to merge themselves with young people because they feel there is the huge potential they can draw out of them. Even if they think these people that don't have the needed skills, they still believe that they can build it among them. A later person is done and necessarily doesn't have the opportunity of growth. We think that the kind of growth that exists and development that exists from our side is one that is better and only there, and we prioritize that. But then the fourth thing you need to understand is that talent development agencies prefer new guys, which means that there's an opportunity for people to even self-innovate and help develop the world and the societies in which they exist. We think that in itself is one thing that is better. Before I proceed, I'll take POI from closing. Oh, okay. So let's proceed. So the fifth thing you need to understand on that level is that people generally are pathetic towards young people. Unlike old people, they feel that regardless of societal pressure and the kind of external factors that cause your downfall, they still feel that you could have done more. Young people have the opportunity that at the end of the day, people are pathetic towards you. They want to empathize with you. They want to share the kind of experiences you have. And we think that you have a very good journey. People want to walk your journey with you so that in the future, they feel that they had a greater part in your success. That is very important. But a few preemptions. Nobody can, from this debate, can come and talk about whether people will be able to sustain the kind of achievement they have simply because this is not mutually exclusive from both sides. Old people can waste their resources, young people can waste their resources. Especially for old people, they will waste those things on drinking and not being simply because they have a boring life. Young people have a lot of things to adventure. Young people are curious and they are able to even understand certain things. But the third thing is that we think that either side. We think that when the issue of even maintaining or sustaining it, we think that young people have the opportunity because they still have an advantage in the future to go back to their mistakes and relearn whatever is happening. We think that is very important. So on the idea that brains talking about experience, we think that they need to be able to show that success or achievement or you being able to identify your talents is highly dependent on your ability to have so many experiences. We think to the extent that young people have so much cognitive capacity and they have so much to be able to learn, we think that in itself constitutes a lot of experience in itself because they are unable to identify what exactly is experience. They need to be able to show that experience is A, B, C before they can win this debate. With this, we are more than proud to win from OO.
We'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. We'd now like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the debate. Here.
Panel, at this point, there are two concessions in this debate. First, that human experiences are important in this debate, but also secondly, that we do not know what will happen in the future, right? So first, on the argument of human experiences, because primarily what opposition is telling you that in their side, these experiences are also important. They exist, but also that they are not as important when we talk about success, right? Panel, notice that there are things that, for example, what we told you in our first argument, that there are things that are very central to how a child or a grown-up person will handle their life or success or all these things, right? What that means is that things like a child playing, going through that process of playing and interacting with fellow children, for example, in nursery school, that particular experience then becomes important in then socializing and networking when they grow up, right? But at a point that they are a child prodigy, that means that it rids them of that interaction with fellow children, so they will not know how to interact or play with these kids. That means that then that creates a ripple effect on their capacity to interact with children in the future, right? So those are the kinds of experiences we are talking about. Panel, notice that our argument then becomes that what is the importance of the natural principle in nature, right? Other than their world where they prioritize the fact that, society is more receptive towards helping children because you are a child. That argument is primarily then rebutted by the fact that we presented to you in the PM speech that then the world becomes it is an exploitive kind of setting, right? Because you as a child, your knowledge does not actually benefit you, yet we prioritize human experience and happiness at the end of the day. What that means that if you are a genius, you're entirely only helping the society. That means if the talent agencies see OO is talking about front you and want to, get the best out of you, then they are doing it at the expense of exploiting you and getting whatever you want, but not necessarily prioritizing on your own happiness. Notice that human interaction is based on a search for connectivity. We are always looking to arrive at something, but then we never arrive. So how human experiences, then that process becomes important is that you go through a process of appreciating these experiences, right? So that at the time that you get, for example, a career, you better know how to handle it. When you are a child and you get these things as a child prodigy, right? The fame, the experiences, and all this kind of life, then what does the chase become? What that then leads to is that it creates the ripple effect of going back to your search for connectivity that you should have gotten as a child. So then that is how the argument of depression and all these things come about, because now you cannot interact with people that are at the same IQ as you because they are way older, but then you can't also interact with people that are your age so you remain in that particular gap. We are prioritizing the happiness of a person. Why? Because it is important that we go through these experiences for our own actualization, right? For our own benefit as human beings, that at the end of the day, because we realize that we are here on a search for happiness, all human beings then need that. So when a child is a child prodigy, what OO is then presenting is an exploitative world where this child is rid of all the experiences that they would need instead to handle the future. So what are we showing you, panel, from side OG? That first of all, why is it important for these experiences to take a process, right? It is because then you become more appreciative of these things, right? You become more appreciative of the process, but also of this thing that you're searching for, because we are always on a search as human beings. We are always looking for things. We are always looking for love, for connectivity, for interaction, and all these kinds of things. Something a child prodigy would not understand. While we can argue the aspect of IQ and the fact that, you reach your potential at a young age, but then that exactly reads you of things like emotional intelligence, because as a child, you first of all, maybe did not know how to solve conflicts within, as a process that you go through as a normal human being and as a normal person. So what that means is that in their world, they have kids that are brilliant at, for example, maybe music or what they do, but they totally have no experience of how to live an outside world. They don't have the basic manners of please and thank you, because a prodigy would not have gone through that experiences of having to understand the importance of politeness and the things and the very bedrock of what then forms human interaction and how we exist on this world. So panel, what are we showing you? The characterization of this debate then becomes, what is the importance of a natural rule in life and as a rule of nature, right? And why is it then important that these children get these experiences? So when you look at it, now let's make a comparative of a child prodigy and a late bloomer, right? So when we talk about kids that are genius and all these kinds of things, we've already showed you the kind of bubble that they are in, because they cannot interact and have normal experiences of love. If, for example, if you even want to just find a partner, such things that are like basic things of how we actually exist as human beings. So they are in a bubble in and of themselves. But how that then becomes problematic is that it isolates them, and the only time they'll become relevant is if they can show up in those capacities as geniuses. They can never then live a normal life of being okay, of being normal, right? Of being, of interacting normally with normal people who are going through these processes and interact them. But you see that most times when humans are interacting, the things that they interact, for example, in a workspaces don't like entirely make who we are as human beings. So that means that by the time, for example, the end of our work day is done, you're going back home to yourself, because you cannot even watch like normal films or all these kinds of things, because those experiences have been ridden from you, because the society only views you as relevant because of this particular thing that they suck out of you. So at the end of the day, we are putting these children prodigies then at the expense of being exploited, right? So what are we showing you, panel? That it is important that as human beings we get the full experiences of life. Why? Because a process is important in not only handling your life as a child, as an adult, but also because we are always on a chase, and if you get this thing that you should maybe like probably be chasing, you don't appreciate it enough, you then take it for granted, you don't even know how to use it, because the only time you ever feel relevant, so you become addicted to being exploited, right? Because the world then just continuously sucks from you. So that is the only relevant as a human being. Yet there are these other experiences like love, friendship, that then their world rids you of, right? So on the basically just on characterization, we think that side OG takes this debate. But also because in their world they're arguing for exploitative kind of nature. So, and then they're arguing for people that then are mentally unstable because they are continuously then going to be lonely, depressed, and looking for connectivity and interaction, right? But also because in their world they argue for exploitation, we think they cannot even argue a better world of like maybe development will happen fast and all these kinds of things, because at the end of the day, someone's productivity is put at a test of having to do just this particular thing, and they are rid of all these other benefits and experiences. Thank you.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the debate. Here.
All right, I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. So panel, a couple of things I'll be doing in my DLO speech. First, take out OG. Second, introduce 2 extensions and tell you why we exclusively satisfy the burden of today's debate and hence win exclusively from OO. So the biggest cases we get from OG are 2. The first is that these people, child prodigies, miss out on life experiences. The reason why that is not true is because of 3 things. First, we think that because these people are child prodigies, they have a special understanding of societal relations. What it means is that they have a better likelihood of understanding what happens within society and better appreciating how to relate with people, how not to hurt people, how to be socially accepted, and how to live with people, because they know that their talents are supposed to be for the benefit of society, and if they cannot relate with society, they lose out. That understanding that they are able to get means that they are most likely going to have an incentive to be able to engage in this particular experiences. Second reason is that we think that because of their special talents, they are able to get a special form of exposure to spaces that ordinary children are unable to reach. Because of that kind of special dispensation that is given them, they are given certain levels of treatment and opportunities that make them learn and even learn faster. Because their developments are even faster, the third thing that happens is that they begin to grow faster, become more diverse in their experiences, unlike ordinary children who just remain within one secular community and do not have mixed experiences. We think that on all levels of human experiences, you get a child prodigy becoming better exposed and getting all of these experiences better, OG out. Second thing they say is that there is exploitation of these children. They do not mechanize how that necessarily is not necessarily true, because we think it's actually even more like profane in a world of old people, because they have lesser periods to be able to work. What that means is that they will want to exploit their own self to undo themselves to work. They do not have the physical abilities to be able to achieve as much within their old age. What that means is that there is even more self-exploitation because they do not have those physical abilities to achieve that on their own. But the reason why more old people will be exploited is because they've lived their lives as boring people. At the point whereby they become immediately successful, what you do is that you attract fake people because you grew up into a class as an unsuccessful person. What that means is that all friends that you get do not necessarily become genuine friends, but then people who just popped up at the latter stage of your life. What that means is that while in the world of a child prodigy, you are able to build up a social base that you agree to, and you're able to grow it into your old age. We think that is more of a sustainable friendship that gives you more surety of a better life. OG is out. First extension in today's debate. Panel, there is a certain level of uncertainty in talent development. Mostly in the normal instances, our parents are most likely going to force certain career paths on us as children because we do not have the ability to become extremely what we are. What you do in our world is that you maximize a couple of things. First, the choice and body autonomy of children, because they immediately grow up or they immediately were born with certain abilities that you cannot deny. The inability for you to deny those special talents means that they immediately begin to go into a path that they are comfortable with. What that means is that there is better surety of success because this is a talent that you are so sure about, you are able to nurture and progress for long. But what's the impact of that? First, you reduce the extent to which you impose decisions on children and reduce the kind of psychological duress and emotional stress you put on them, thereby reducing the extent of torture that is given to children. You can talk about how immoral that in itself is and unprincipally justified because they can always have their human agency wanting to be protected. The second thing is what brings effective career development. You are more likely going to develop faster in your career when you're able to get a quick start. That is the reason why people who were able to buy like houses within the past have become millionaires within a certain. Families continue to be rich because their grandparents were rich. What it means is that there is a likelihood of being able to sustain the riches when you are able to gather them quicker, rather than when you wait until like a very long period of time. We think that that marginal ability for us to be better able to develop a career and benefit from it is better. But the second thing that's very simple is that you have a long lifespan to be able to achieve that. You already get that in my characterization. The third thing is that there is more self-actualization because this is not a path that was imposed on you getting to your latter path because of society, like so many things you tried failed. What you avoid in our world is a try and error at your later stages. What try and error does is that you are a complement of so many regrets, so many like failed attempts. What that does to you itself is that it has the propensity of breaking you down and not making you to go the extra mile to become better. The last thing is that it improves your capability of improving your talent. But then what happens in the world of late bloomers? First, we think that late bloomers necessarily are not appreciated by society. That directly clashes with what second speaker says. Because there is no extreme wow factor, because in your old age, there are so many other successful people who have made it in life before you came. What it means is that there is no special kind of feeling that society gives to you. What happens in the world of a child prodigy is that there is no expectation for you, child, to owe $1 million. So if you are able to grow up and develop an app at age 8, you are seen as an extreme outlier. You are treated better. There is better celebration in our world. You are already happy for us. So the last thing is that there is so much luck and credibility in the life of an early grower, because there is that natural feeling that children are loved, and when they are even special in terms of their capabilities, there is that ability for them to be seen as extremely special. We win on that particular class. On the sustainability of wealth, my papa already tells you that, oh, these people can both waste their wealth. But why is our world even better? We think that when you are grown, you are faced with social factors like the ability or the pressure for you to care for your family, care for society. Society begins to make immediate claims. They think they are part of your socialization, so you owe them something. As a child prodigy, what society feels is that they owe you a responsibility to make you develop and grow. Unlike all the achievers, which society then begins to drain them. In our world, we have more money, more enjoyment, and more of all of that. But it's very important for you to recognize that OG is out of today's because they fail to know that the decision-making process of life is one that is chanced on time and probability. That if there exists an ability for us to choose within the early important stages of our life, we better do that, because we would have had a long life that has had investment. But then what is life if it is not lived at its best possible time and achieving all the things at a greater point? Why do we win today's debate? A couple of things. Give the best form of characterization. We don't know what opposition will do, but secondly, we extend to you why status quo looks like and how people are forced and imposed career paths on. But secondly, we tell you how all the worlds look like and engage the extremities that you get from opening government. Proud to win from OO.
Would like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. Now I'd like to welcome the member of government to begin the closing half. Yeah.
Okay, first, before I start, I think maybe because of a lot of things to run, I won't take up your, but in case that my closing has a very serious view, I can take it at 5:30. I'm Zachary Mbeke, and I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. The entire problem I'm having with the OO, even before I start running my case, is two things. One, the leader of opposition comes in and says that you are having a choice. And again, his partner comes and also speaks of this particular choice. But the debate is that without foresight, this particularly means that you cannot predict. So it means that you don't know what this particular world holds for you. You can't predict what the future looks like. It's very necessary for us to understand with that. But even to that, they engage on the issues of experience and the issues of self-actualization. But you find why this is there is because in the entire opening, no one has described for us how status quo looks like. And I will engage on that, why I speak of how status quo really looks like. To that, the one thing I want to do as the closing government is describe the status quo and compare for you which type of a child can survive in that particular status quo. Because as long as we do that, we shall now get which particular side of the world runs this particular debate. But the second thing is good for us also to describe how psychological system of a child works and which particular world can really take into the consideration of psychological system of a child. But the third thing, I will now show you how best we can protect both the child and the talent. That is everything I'm going to do in this particular debate. How to do this thing? Let me first start by describing for you how society, or how status quo works and how society always works. We think that in the normal society, child prodigies are always the minority. This particularly means they are few in numbers. For example, one within a society, or the class of 60, only one is the genius, only one is the child prodigy, but the rest are normal. But we have two types of society. Then these particular types of society, I'm going to explain for you and show you the impact they have. First type, it is natural functioning of a society to be afraid of this particular people, but even if so, society always tend to be afraid of them. They have this particular impact. One, they tend not to socialize with others. This particular prodigy child tend not to socialize with others because they feel like there's no one to socialize with them. But even if they do so, the society always, even if they want to socialize with others, the rest of the other society tend always not to socialize with them because they feel like we don't belong together, they don't particularly integrate. Why this is very dangerous is because of one, there will be a form of self-stigmatization existing in the society which is very dangerous for the growth of the child. So that particularly means that it is particularly good for me to describe for you how a child's psychological system works. A child's psychology works in a nature in which it is readily affected and stressed when he or she sees other peers running away from them. If they see their fellows running away from them, this child will always be stressed up. In fact, they will even go and tell their parent that why always others don't particularly work with me. This one disturbs the mind of this particular child, and they will always feel afraid. This has this particular impact. One, they will always hinder the growth of a child because the child will always be stressed up. And number two, they will always be afraid even to share what they have because one, they will feel like they don't have a person to share it to. But even if they share it to, they feel like that their fellow peers don't appreciate them, even if they all are the one appreciating them, because their fellow peers will feel that they don't appreciate them. What in the opposition's world, the child will develop psychological torture in a nature. That is the first type of a world where maybe society is afraid of this child. But in the second type of a world, where society, in second type of a world, even in the society where these children get accepted, it always works in this way. One, they attract large numbers of followers. The way OO says, they tend to become the center of attraction in this particular debate. With that particular psychology of a child, it's very important for me to tell you that, again, the psychology of a child always makes them to be naturally excited when they see high acceptance, and this is very dangerous. When they see high acceptance, they always naturally acceptance. A child psychology works with that particular case. We feel like with this particular high acceptance, it has the following problem. One, they will be sunk into this following to an extent they don't explore the other different side of the world. For example, we have issues maybe that we should do with the family, other relationship issues, and the other issues to work on. But even in the second, they will be prioritizing success to maintain the buy-in in the society because they don't, and now they will be working under natural pressure in the status quo. Why do you feel that this is impactful? These two are impactful because, number one, this will make them lose social interaction. They will be having no time to interact with the family, to interact with their relationships, manners, because they want to attain this buy-in from the other people in particular society. And even to that extent, we feel like that having too much pressure within the society is always dangerous. Working under pressure is always dangerous because of two. One, you always tend to work to make society happy. To an extent, you try to forget yourself. But even to that particular extent, in case of failure, the blame is always detrimental because you feel you have failed the society. This makes it difficult because one, stress
is always now at a bigger instance that it affects the mental instability, mental stability. Now they become mental unstable. But again, you tend to hide from society, reducing social interaction. That in case of failure, you will always tend to hide. You don't want the society to see you because already you are having that much follow-up. You see that maybe you failed your followers, so you will hide for them not to see you. Because of this will hit you up. You'll be mentally unstable and you won't achieve self-actualization they are speaking about. But even to that extent, we feel like a person who has this particular talent has no experience because we are bringing that in our particular world. I say I will only get the CG, maybe if they have a PY, keep your PY for my whip. To that particular extent, the CG has no PY. What our world provides, very important for us to understand that. We feel our world has no pressure. Working under less pressure is that you are not distracted by the expectations of the society. This makes you to become yourself with this. One, you are able to interact properly with the society, identifying potentials and what is needed to be fixed within the society. And with this, you become a better creative person socially and holistically. Because now you've interacted with the society, you know where best to work on, now you become more creative and more creative. That is, I think, the best experience we want, not the experience they are talking about. There's no experience that can come without interaction and knowing what to work on and what not to work on. In our side of the world is where experience is achieved. But even to the second, in any world that I earlier described, we think that latter bloomer always tend to survive because naturally they tend to blend with the society. The society always thinks that during the child age, because I think at that particular point is where the psychology of a child matters. This particular child belongs to them. Because at later age, now you can know how to put into the pressure and etc., etc. So they always tend to blend with society in a nature. With this natural acceptance, they are able to interact from childhood to even later in life. This makes them happy and mentally stable as they don't go through the stigmatization. This makes them less volatile. E.g., they have now best in relationships, social interaction, family, faith, love, or even just that success that comes later. This is the happiness society is largely hoping for. We feel that if there is one quality that trumps all... Thank you very much. Let me rest my case.
We'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. We'd now like to welcome the member of opposition to continue the debate. Here.
Okay, just give me a second to just arrange this. Okay, is this audible enough? Thank you. Starting my speech in 3, can I start? Sure. Okay, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So panel, this motion is actor heavy in terms of comparisons. And so without proving why their side of the house has like major impacts upon this actor, neither of government bench can be able to win this debate. The motion then is boiled down to like very few things in terms of comparisons, right? Would you rather be like an 80-year-old master chess player vis-a-vis like just being a 5-year-old chess player, playing with all these grandmasters and all these things? Let's start with OG. We think OG misses out on this debate because they tell you about the whole idea about this child prodigy missing out opportunities. Notice that even if it is true that these people miss out on these opportunities, we think these people are still able to get better opportunities in the form of scholarships and all these things, which are an actively better thing in our side of the house. But even secondly, notice that the biggest case is talking to you about how there's exploitation and all these things. But notice, panel, that's fine. School exploits you every day by you giving them money to teach you textbook stuff and all these things. They need to justify why that exploitation is particularly harmful in this situation, especially where we are able to show you that this child has unique interactions. It's not enough to say that this is some sort of exploitation and all these things. We are going to deal with CG, but for now, let's just give you our framing. Listen, we think that, as you've already been told, children exist in their most fragile stages of life, which then means two things. One, they depend on parents and societies for their upbringing in general. Whatever the society tells you, whatever your parent is able to tell you, plays a large role in your life and all these things. But even secondly, understand, panel, that these children are emotionally disempowered, which then means two things. One, one, they find all these things such as rebuking as a sign of hatred and all these things. But even secondly, they take the smallest signs of failures as a reason why they are likely to become failures, if at all you don't consider them failures as compared to all these prodigies who exist in society. The problem then becomes a child in the normal situations feels like they already have these things like bringing them down in terms of esteem and all these things. Notice we've already given you like 3 characterizations. One, on how this is the most fragile stage of their life for these children. But even secondly, why this is the most impactful stage in their life, because this shapes how they approach things in life and all these things. But thirdly, and very importantly, why children are the most disempowered actors in this life, in like this debate, and why they need the most benefits at this stage, and we think that's very important. Argument number 1 on why this is very important to the child prodigy, right? You need to realize that OO talks to you about the idea about how like these children are likely to have less social pressure. But notice, panel, this is unlikely to be true, because notice that these children are already child prodigies, and therefore the social pressure which already exists is going to be high, because they tell you compare this pressure they're getting as compared to where they're adults, they're going to have less pressure. That's what OO tells you. We tell you that this is highly unlikely. The best thing then becomes, how do they like get some recourse to be able to deal with this like pressure which already exists? 4 mechanisms. 1, they have a coherent support system which exists around you. With this then like debunks what CG tells you about self-stigmatization and all these things. Notice, panel, when you're a child prodigy, your family becomes closer to you, your neighbors want to work with you and all these things, people want to associate with you, they even want to protect you and all these things. If anything, they're going to give you advice about how to maneuver the world. We think we see this with Jordan Henderson trying to mentor people like Jude Bellingham and all these things. But secondly, and very importantly, is that this support system around you affirms you. And we think this is particularly important for this growing child. Notice, affirming is important in childhood because this is a stage where you're still developing, your mental health needs to be protected and all these things. They need to tell you all these good things and all these things. But even thirdly, panel, notice that these children are likely to interact with big people in the field because you're a prodigy and all these things. You have a comparative advantage over the children who already exist. We think that to that extent, it's very easy for you to like go and meet Joe Biden, to go and meet Uhuru Kenyatta and all these people and all these things. You interact with the big people within this field. What that then means, panel, is twofold. One, you're able to like get more skills to the extent where you go and meet Garry Kasparov and he's able to teach you about like majority of these things. You're able to get like more skills than your counterpart. But even secondly, you grow up with this desire to be able to become successful and all these things. Fourthly, panel, recognize that all this unique behavior, all this unique experience means that you're able to behave differently, because OG tell you that, oh, you'll not be able to like behave with discipline and all these things. Notice, to the extent where you've gone to eat breakfast with Joe Biden like nearly every day, you've gone to eat with Garry Kasparov and all these things because you're a prodigy. The incentive exists to be able to carry yourself to a higher standard because you have extra responsibility. These people look at you in a different light. We think we've seen this with prodigies in football such as Paudc and Giovanni Reina. These prodigies still go to school, but still for some reason carry themselves to a higher standard and all these things. The comparative then becomes, once you're a late bloomer, panel, understand that no one necessarily applauds you and affirms you as a child, because in any case you could have been number last or like just me and Nilomo and all these things. If you exist in the worst or rather extreme spectrum, panel, we then think that people will treat you like someone who's not going to necessarily succeed. This is something which is likely to lower your esteem and all these things. We think that's something which is likely to be problematic. But before I engage with like the comparatives, let me get into like proper extension. That was analysis. Listen, 2 things. 1, we're going to show you how the child can be able to see this as a mechanism of upliftment. But even secondly, how this then favors minority children with talents and all these things. 1, on the mechanism of upliftment, right? We tell you that necessarily some of the children who exist within these spaces necessarily come from poor families and they suffer a lot as a result of all these things. Notice, in our world, we tell you that these people can be able to access these special things such as scholarships. They have more unique help, things which are suited to like bringing them out of poverty and all these things. Notice the thing with like specifically these unique opportunities, right? They don't just target any child. They don't just target like these people who are 40 years and all these things. They target people who are still at their maturity age and all these things. You're still developing and therefore they want to like be able, they have the incentive to be able to grow you and all these things. Notice then, panel, on their side, you're likely to be privy to all these problems and suffer like all the other people and all these things. We think on our side of the house, these unique opportunities are likely to come to your side of the house. On our side of the house, you have the opportunity to emancipate yourself from poverty and all these things. On their side, you can go and start playing with children when you see them in the field because, oh well, you're a late bloomer and all these things. Minorities, because we think this is fairly important, right? We think as status quo exists with minorities in the current world, if you're an Islam child, a black child, a Philippine child, a Latino child in any situation panel, we think as it stands, the treatment is always going to be different from you, even as compared to those other people, right? People have already written off you. People have already written you off even as a child and all these things. They believe, okay, fine, this is a black child. There's nowhere he's going to go and all these things. They've already predetermined your fate and all these things. What this then does, panel, we think it lowers the esteem of these children. But notice then the comparative, right? If you're a late bloomer, these people likely have already written you off when you were a child and all these things. You're disadvantaged times two. You're not only like normal, but like people have already written you out. Notice then, panel, on our side of the house, we tell you, you can precautiously choose to like become this child prodigy to be able to become better. Notice, you're able to access more unique benefits, and we think this is an opportunity for you to be able to stand out and become like Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, and all these things. You can be able to change systemic bias and uplift even your family and all these things. You can be able to break the cycle, and very importantly, panel, we think you can be able to influence more people within your setting, within that like minority class, to be able to stand better. We think we defend this world better from side closing opposition. Here.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. Now I'd like to welcome the government whip to conclude the case for government bench. Here.
Yes, 5:30. I'll take POIs at minute 5:30. Yes. Okay. My name is Wycliffe. I'll begin in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, essentially the whole debate, lack out of it, because one, they don't acknowledge that all of this is without foresight. When they talk about this child will choose this because they have this talent, this child will choose this because they have this parent will want this, it is actually without foresight. Essentially, in this debate, we are having two types of children, right? We're having a late bloomer who is not showing signs, who is showing signs of growing later. Maybe talk about early developments in puberty while the peers are developing early. And this child prodigy is showing exceptionally high development compared to their peers, right? So essentially, in this debate, OO was supposed to do one clear thing. We were supposed to tell us why, even without this foresight, they choose this problematic world, right? And we define this problematic world as CG when we describe the status quo and compared to you that, you know what we want is these two types of children. Where best can we get a child that develops holistically? In the status quo panel, in this status quo, the child that is going to the child that is a late bloomer panel is somebody who is going to be resilient, is somebody who is going to be persistent. In this status quo panel, a child that is a child prodigy is somebody who is going to receive backlash because they're not really going to interact socially well in the society, they're not integrated well in the society, and this child is going to get all of these harms in this debate. It is also exclusively from CG that we tell you how the psychological system of this child works, and we tell you how best can we get a perfect world for both the child and this talent, right? So case of the OO. OO talk about, you know what, individuals prioritize getting all success they'll get in life and the talent institutions. And they give a very weird example. They tell you of the example of footballers such as Messi panel. But notice one thing. Even if you don't identify this talent early, it doesn't mean you won't identify it. You're just a late bloomer. Later on, for example, the Messi that they're talking about was a late bloomer. But ideally, Messi developed to be one of the best footballers we have right now. It doesn't mean that when you're a late bloomer, you don't get this success later on. All they're saying is that, you know what, when we get a Mbappe somewhere, let's take this Mbappe to a talent institution and whatnot and whatnot. But panel, what we bring problematic in this world, right, is that a child prodigy is likely to lack out of this social integration, likely to lack out of this development as a child, likely to develop all of this socially in what we're talking about. For example, a child prodigy in their world, for example, a footballer such as Mason Greenwood, who is also a child prodigy. But notice how Mason Greenwood was actually locked out of social development, Mashujaa is going to be an even problematic person later on because they can't really interact socially and whatnot. Number two, they talk about better understanding of social relations. So how panel can these people understand a better understanding of the social relation panel if these children who are child prodigies are not integrated into society, if the peers that are supposed to be integrated with are not accepting them, if these people have a backlash by society, if they're less and less integrated in the society panel, they won't get this understanding of society, therefore they won't get to be integrated and they won't get to interact with them. They talk about maximized choice and autonomy of children panel. On the contrary, this child will have no autonomy. The parents will immediately take them to private schools, tutors, and force all this of them to chase this success. These children will not have an autonomy to choose what they want. In our world, the late bloomer doesn't know what he wants yet. For example, Albert Einstein, because of this late blooming, was able to identify that, you know what, I'm good in physics and history and whatnot and whatnot. That is why Albert Einstein is able to develop this thing. On their world, there is less and less autonomy because these parents want you to chase this success. They want you to have this success. And on a comparative level, if you don't achieve this success, society will have a backlash on you. If you don't achieve this, if you don't have this social pressure that is existing in society, is going to let you have less and less social development. They also talk about more money and more enjoyment. Panel, don't think that late bloomers won't necessarily grow to have more money. They won't necessarily grow to have happiness. They won't necessarily grow to enjoy this enjoyment in essentially they talk about or rank fourth in this debate. CEO take the extreme end of this debate and talk about an 8-year-old chess player and a 5-year-old chess player panel. We think panel, when we talk about a late bloomer, we don't necessarily this person is going to develop 75 years later. We think this person is just developing in the age bracket of these peers, is just developing slower. They're not developing extremely later, for example, for them to take such a case extreme scenario. But here's the problematic thing we have in your case. They talk about unique interaction. What they don't tell you, panel, is that this interaction that these child prodigies are having, they're having these interactions with people who are not of their peer group. Therefore, they're not having a social interaction in its success, that is in its existence, that is benefiting them. Therefore, this child prodigy has a higher social pressure because the person they're relating with are people who are successful. Therefore, this person has a higher social pressure from the society, from the family, and essentially, this is what we argue, because social pressure is detrimental to this child's development, right? They also talk about minority children will get scholarships. Panel, we think that it doesn't mean that late bloomers won't get to develop this talent. These late bloomers won't get to develop this success. These late bloomers won't get to develop this scholarships that they're talking about. Essentially, they don't really bring anything to this debate. So here's the case of the closing government, right? We tell you that in the society right now, the integration of the society right now, where these child prodigies are actually not getting socially integrated. Their peers are not accepting them. The society is giving them extra pressure. They're having extra pressure. They're not socially integrating to be in this debate. But panel, notice that we're dealing with children. So where best can we get something that is best for our children? Where best can we tap into the success? Even if we show earlier signs or they are going to have a later sign. Because necessarily, panel, late bloomers will also have success. They're just not showing all these signs earlier. The child prodigies are just showing all these signs earlier. But panel, notice that all of this is without foresight, right? Essentially, we want a world where our children can actually be resilient, our children can actually be persevere, because we know these children can become creative people, socially and holistically, not the chasing success they're talking about, right? It is also the case of the closing government that tells you that when these children are chasing success early enough, by showing virtue of these children being by virtue of being children prodigies, the social pressure that is going to be exerted to them by the society, one, by the families, two, to actually achieve this success is going to make them, if they fail, they actually be hurt, they'll actually retreat. Therefore, it's going to be even more problematic to the development of this child, right? We also tell you that where society expects these children to succeed and they don't succeed, they'll actually get backlash, right? Because we tell you when these children prodigy are showing all these signs of child prodigy, the society wants to amass a certain sense of success to them, right? That if they don't get this success, they're going to receive backlash, they're going to have a heartbreak, they're going to have all of this stuff that we're going to talk about. On a comparative level, panel, we think that for us to get a world that is best for our children, panel, it is only CG that brings you the whole issue of social interaction and the benefits that this late bloomer will actually have in his holistic development, right? We tell you that this late bloomer will also achieve this success, right? It doesn't mean that they won't achieve this success. We actually just tap into where best can they get this success. In a world where society will frown on them if they don't succeed, in a world where society is giving them extra pressure, in a world where they don't develop holistically on their own, or in a world where they're not socially integrated, we think we'll take a route where these children can actually develop better, where they're actually doing this on their own and where society is not exerting pressure on them. Thank you.
I'd like to thank that speaker for that fine speech. Now I'd like to welcome the Chief Whip to conclude the debate. You're here.
Hello, I'm going to take POIs hopefully from both sides, although I think we haven't engaged with OG, so we'll try a bit of that. All right. Sorry for the movement, I'm just setting up my timer. Ready to start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, we shall first engage opening government and then compare ourselves to our OO and then finally deal with closing government. So, so far from the debate, it is clear that the points that have come from opening government are exploitation of children and then the socialization of children as being the two issues. So the thing is, we already provided replies on exploitation. How necessarily it is non-unique and how still in status quo, all children are forced to go to school for years on end, 5 days a week without their consent, with very little control of where you go. So on our side, we say we take them elsewhere, or they can be able to choose what they want. We think on our side, children have greater capacity when they are child prodigies. When you are 1 in a million, there's greater power upon you to demand something, as opposed on the other side where you're necessarily more imposed upon what you want. Because you clearly can't say, I am better at X than I am at Y. So you are pushed to either of the two options, and you still fail at the two, and you bloom late. But we also gave you something very specific, the idea of the age of maturity, upon which you are expected to provide some level of maturity in a certain field, which means that on the side of late bloomers, you are necessarily failing to meet that threshold, and that is where you are more likely to be treated as an outcast, and necessarily to be treated as someone who is falling out of the mold, and more likely to be an outcast on their side. So we think on that one we win. Exploitation is equivalent. On our side, we think we have greater power and incentive to control our lives, because we have something to negotiate against. You can say that I am extremely capable in a certain thing. So I want a child to go, I want a chance to go play with other children, and to be able to be given certain toys that make me happy. We have greater power on our side. Socialization of kids. Notice here, you also have greater power, so you can control what you're able to socialize with. But we think even OO already replied to this, because they said these are geniuses are probably people with greater cognitive capacity, so they can necessarily tell what are the social underpinnings of relations. So they're able to rise above the cacophony of I hate you, I love you. They can tell that these people are probably looking at me in a certain way because of my level of capacity. I'm not just dragged down into this problem. But even if this was not the case, we think they still have social mechanisms, which comes from my partner, about how the family and friends are more closer to them because they realize the importance. And they can even be given child counselors and given more greater protection than the children on their side who are abused and not even thought of as special. So they don't even receive those levels of the kind of protection you get from social mechanisms. So we think on those two levels, they're necessarily worse. We think on our side, the kids can be trained. We have given you why they have a greater responsibility to behave well and be able to become disciplined. So we think on those two things, we take them out. Let's just compare ourselves with OO. So OO tell you that we already give you a differentiation. They say that children have low pressure, but we think even in a situation of high pressure, assuming your best case scenario, we have provided mechanisms in order to deal with this. They give the response that prodigies have understanding of social interactions. We say that the prodigies have greater capacity or they have greater power. So compare, they give incentive, we give power. You may have the incentive, but if you don't have the power, we necessarily win. So because we give you the power. We talk of the trauma that these individuals experience. If at all you're going to be treated as an individual who is not useful, because we think you live in a society of utilitarianism. Even in school, the most valuable child is the one who is topping the charts. They're the ones who are given the most attention. They're the ones who are given presents by their parents. So you experience trauma. From the KFC example, you knock on so many doors. So many people tell you are trash. So many people tell you don't measure up. And that means you suffer lots of years of trauma before you ever get to the good part of your life. Even if we assume success, which they don't assume on our side, which is very uncomparative. We assume success that one day you'll make that KFC. But for you to ever get there, you experience suffering, a very high very high level of suffering for a very long period of your time, and you're treated as an outcast. So necessarily we treat our children better and we give that level of trauma. We tell you that you're given the trauma of being an idiot, and we tell you the idea of a target audience for growth is that you're being charted to occupy certain positions. You're given very good examples by my member. He tells you of these young individuals who are able to go into sport. They say Messi was a late bloomer. Nonsense. He was taken by La Masia by the time he was 8 years old. He was discovered talent. He was nurtured and he was protected. That's what you should value. And we think things like chess clubs, science fair clubs, debate clubs, all target kids in order to grow their capacity. So on this, you can weigh us against them on better analysis, better examples, and we give you the incentives of these individuals. Let us engage CG. We think they agree that you can't predict what the future looks like, but a lot of their case has the following responses. What if you fail? Society will treat you bad if you fail. All those responses out. They are not necessarily engaging with the idea of foresight, because they are saying, well, there is necessarily an argument or you're making a decision based on a probability of something happening. But principally the motion says without foresight. So you cannot predict whether you will succeed or fail. So even if we assume a best case scenario of you succeeding or failing, it doesn't matter. What matters is you can't make that, you don't know, so you can't use that reasoning to make a decision now. So that matter does not count. But they give more analysis on the idea of socialization, because they say that people are afraid of you because you are certain a top tier genius. So they give two worlds, where you are loved or where you are hated. Where you are hated, we say that you still have this kind of social mechanisms around you. You still have access to medical doctors. You still have access to psychologists, and you still have access to mental superiority and mental capacity to be able to go over the crowd of social interaction that is just based on how much you like me or how much you love me. But you still get great love from your parents because they understand you need greater care and they have the incentive to do this. On our side, we still take all of that. And then we tell you that, also that mechanization. CG.
Child prodigies due to pressure in society are after success only, not necessarily getting toys or playing with other children. They're just chasing success, meaning that lesser and lesser integrated with social development field. Do you think this is a better environment for this child to grow in?
Okay, so here's the thing, yeah? On both sides, there'll be pressure to succeed. You think there's pressure to succeed when you're good, there's pressure to succeed when you're actively failing. You push the child who is actively failing more because you do not want a failure as your child. You don't want your child to be succeeding when they are 40. If you have your child living with you as a parent when they are 35, you necessarily feel a certain type of way. We don't want children to live in that kind of world. We prefer the pressure on our side because there are mechanisms to take care of it. There are mechanisms to protect this child. The pressure may be high, but we think the pressure on their side is worse, it goes on for longer, and is not something that leads to good outcomes, and the individual experiences trauma for a longer time. So notice the following things. On our side, you necessarily have to deal in short-term circumstances, and we tell you about the structural factors, about the age of maturity, about the target audience of who is being looked for. So necessarily all these things mean you are better. The existence of mechanisms to deal with stress are good, and their arguments about failure do not apply. Let us engage a comparative. On our side, you have greater social understanding, greater understanding of power dynamics, and greater cognitive ability, and we provide children affirmation. In order to keep these children pushing harder, you give them affirmation. On that side, the children are told you should perform, but they're rebuked when they don't perform. And children don't want that. They want someone who is necessarily telling them you're good and you're great, and children value off of that. So they are more likely to develop in the long term. Our extension is very specific. We tell you the framing of children and how we want to protect their minds and how those around them are very caring. We give you a minorities extension about how you can be the one who breaks the curse, even if it's very short term. In those 3, 4, 5 years, we think that is very short term and not very projecting. In those particular times, you can change the kind of facilities that are available to your family and change their lives. Proud to oppose.
Fantastic. We'd like to thank the last speaker for that fine speech and the speakers at large. Fantastic debate. If you could give us 15 minutes, feel free to say hi to that neighbor who refused to take your PI. It's very important.